it's certainly a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. This is my first time here as opposite to the previous speaker, and I must say that after the breathtaking talk, I'm really pleased to be here, share some of the thoughts, and perhaps have another view also, because I come from the food science side, having been embedded in nutrition research and doing on that also for long. So I work with two organizations, VTT Technical Research Center of Finland, which is technology development, and University of Eastern Finland, which is then clinical nutrition. And when I speak for cereal foods and health, that's because we have been working a lot with cereal foods according to the Health Grain project we are going on. And from the point of view of healthier cereal foods, it's interesting to think of where the nutrition altogether is going and how can we promote their use. Although about personalized nutrition, that is, as we all agree, I think it's providing foods and diets according to individual needs. And actually, what is it in opposition for? A non-personalized nutrition. And that's the population level approach and speaking for population like said here. And it was interesting when you look for the 10 years past, and it was very well shown some cases also, what has happened actually, what were the expectations, where are we now? The expectations very much were that there would be a specific market sector on personalized nutrition. Very much there were some, in the US part, some supplements, some specific things they were speaking about that market and this market. And as I see to that, actually all the nutrition should be it's anyway individual question, and we should go towards personalization by all means. That's the way how we can actually come at a better position at each individual. And this is from the old report from 2003. Actually, they were trying to forecast what is the situation now this year, 2010. And I think they had a very odd idea of speaking about it. It depends on how the flow of information from science is going to general public, like the Nutrigenomics understanding should be in the public. But on the other hand, they say that it's also about broader acceptance in medicine and society at large of the critical role of prevention in maintaining long-term health. Well, that is, I think, something which I at least would agree about. And they were speaking about nutrigenomic science and the information flow and then creating personal nutrition. Well, I would also, like Mike Kidney was saying, I would also like to include in the science base not only the nutrigenomics and genetics, but specifically also metabolomics, and rather speak about nutritional systems biology, all the means, all the information we can get from the human body in response to diets. But anyway, the personalized nutrition is how to use this knowledge to create some new kinds of therapies, diets, and it has also always to be according to the personal preferences, requirements, and perhaps then responses. So it's very much about how to counsel and how to help people to pick up a good diet. And I was very pleased to also hear what the previous talker had in mind, because we clearly are sharing some views of it does not really be that you are personalizing something according to just your own genetic makeup. It's also many other things which can be personalized so that the let's say the message of joy of being well by help of eating nicely will come. And we need other technologies, as was pointed out. We need information and communication technologies. We need also perhaps other technologies, diagnostics and so on. We also need a lot of behavioral sciences, and we also need food sciences, because anyway, food is what we eat, and we have to combine all of these, use this knowledge and to create something new. But as was pointed out, when it's new, it's always not easy to see what is there to come. Well, we know all these books which have been written about different technologies, and in science there's one book also about supermarkets. We very nicely heard, I don't go in details already in my kidneys talk, about the different services which are launched by many food companies, but also small diagnostic, small ICT companies and larger ones. So most of them are actually anyway, as was shown, giving dietary guidance. So they offer you some kind of solution to pick up something which is better for you. That is, so actually the business is the same as it has been for dietary dietitians also in the past, helping people to pick something which is good and for them. And also, as was pointed out, there is clearly a need for social and psychological sciences, and I'm very happy to see that some of that is coming in an EU-funded project. There are some individual studies already done, like this one on social sciences, where they're trying to analyze what is this market, how do consumers perceive, and what kind of business model it has been developing with these, mainly with these genetic tests. And in another study, they have studied somehow the consumer acceptance. So this is one of the first papers on Nutrigenomics-based personalized nutrition. And I don't go in detail, but what they were really doing, they were looking at those aspects which are important for the consumer, which actually then determine the preference to use or not of this kind of new service which will be offered. And that is always when, like, personalized nutrition is also, like was pointed out, very much about businesses, new business models around creating healthier eating. Previously, we believe a lot in functional foods, and they are still one market category, and they are a specific issue. But this is very much about how we can build on a diet. And working personally a lot with plant-based foods, grains, dietary fiber, staple foods, everyday food, I'm very concerned also that we are not going to create some kind of society where we are having very sophisticated eating or something else than because we have lots of healthy options. We just have to help people to pick up what's good for their makeup and good for their preferences. All right, then cereal foods, I don't have to say that they are our daily food, provide lots of the energy, much of the carbohydrate, dietary fiber, many other necessary things. They have to be processed before eating, and that is what we have been studying a lot, because always processing changes their properties. During the last 100 years, we have developed processing in such a way that we are removing much of which is believed to be the health protective parts, the outer layers of the grain. And there are many reviews, there are many epidemiological studies, there are many meta-analyses clearly pointing out that whole grains are protective against type 2 diabetes. Here's one of those studies, and also cardiovascular disease. Here's another. And a difference between 2 or 3 dosages of whole grain foods would have a clear lower the risk of these chronic diseases. And there are more and more studies. I don't go there. This is the last one I show, a recent one, trying to go to the mechanisms and pointing out towards inflammation as one outcome there. And also, I don't go in details, but there's so much work on inflammation, and that's one of the routes by which also whole grain foods probably can mediate their health beneficial effects. But currently, we are still working on the mechanisms. Here is the part of the grain which we are mostly concerned about, both in terms of processing and nutrition, and that's the aleurone part, the outer part of the grain, where we see the very outest part, which is lignocellulosic, and we see the cell layer with the large cells there, where we have most of the components which we believe contribute to the positive health effects. Of course, we have then lots of starch and protein and some lipids also in the grain. And quite long it was thought that it's dietary fiber which is the protective part there, if we speak about the compositional question of the raw material. But now we fully agree that as with most foods, it's a concerted action of many of the components and many of the features on the grain. And we need these mechanistic studies to be able to develop food technology so that we know how we should process the foods so that they will be good for this chronic disease prevention also. And one of the important things here is that grains are really and cereal foods are the important source of fiber and non-digestible carbohydrates and the phenolic compounds, which all go in the large intestinal fermentation. And clearly this is one of the hypotheses now that we have, that it is via the fermentation, which then has many systemic effects also in the other tissues, and supporting the the reactions there, which are important. And if we speak about genomics, and we need to take into consideration, as was pointed out this morning, all the gut microbiota genomics, which has an interplay there. So I used to say that we have to very much take care that we feed the bacterial community inside, because it participates so much in the circulation of the host that we need to consider those together. And it also processes a big part of the food, which and then is the protective part. And if we look what's going on in the genetic research, very recently there was this paper of mining, going to mine the databases and look for genes which would be associated with obesity and type 2 diabetes, and it was very much then carbohydrate-related enzymes which came up here, which is not in a way anything to wonder about, but anyway, pointing out. The other thing is that we know that there are lots of phenolics in these foods, and there's lots of scattered evidence that polyphenols have also an important role in the body in controlling the glucose homeostasis. And we just made a review on this, looked at all the different points of action at different levels where actually polyphenols can interfere with the carbohydrate metabolism. And this certainly is one of the mechanisms which could be behind the protective role of the grains. I'm not going in detail to the research we have done in Kuopio on this, but I just briefly make a very brief summary of that, because we have seen that our national specialty bread, rye bread, gives lower postprandial insulin responses. We have seen that quite often, and also that in the longer term intervention studies we can see that we have enhanced insulin secretion. And that led us to do a study where we looked at the genetic or gene expression profiles in adipose tissue after intake of such a diet, to see basically at that time the hypothesis was that they have the beneficial effect like we saw, and that would also alter the gene expression that would be reflected there. And the only difference actually, or the basic difference we had in the diets was that the other diet, all the breads had a lower insulin, postprandial insulin demand, and which also then resulted in slightly different glucose curves, but not really a lot different. The major difference is in the insulin response. Both diets which were used here were quite high in fiber, so that was not the main difference there. And what we found out was that we had, again, enhanced insulin secretion as the endpoint. We also saw that there were changes in the gene expression patterns in the adipose tissue. This was in the absence of weight loss, which would probably otherwise mask all those changes caused by diet, but in this case we saw clear changes. And we also identified new genes which then were shown to be probably connected also to the risk of type 2 diabetes, which were modulated by the diet. Then we went on to, we studied the inflammation markers, and also still are in progress of doing metabolomic analysis, and we got results which supported the results on inflammation markers, showing that the diet with higher insulin response was kind of more pro-inflammatory, and the other one was protective in this part. So this research is still in progress. Here's a quick snapshot of the results. That's a part of the research to basic understanding of how and why is rye bread and certain cereal foods protective. And this research can be used both as a base for development of better foods for the by the food technology, but also then the other question is how can we use the research and how should we combine that to genotyped populations and so on, to see about different responses and so on, and how can we use that to help people to understand that what they eat means something for them. And certainly, because I work at the interface of food technology and nutrition sciences, I always say that we need to learn more about the dietary signaling and how food is then from the gastrointestinal tract giving the signals which then influence all those reactions we are starting for the disease risks. And certainly inflammatory and immune responses, the dynamics of the large intestinal fermentation and the metabolic profiling in different tissues and also fluids is important there. And we are especially interested also in adipose tissue gene expression. But coming back then to the question of personalized nutrition, we know that people are, if they would just go and choose, and we would just go and choose the food because of the health outcome, life would be easier for nutritionists and public health gatekeepers. However, foods have so many values, we all know, and consumer food choice criteria are very, very different, and they also depend very much on the context, on the situation, and so on. And therefore I think personalized nutrition, really, as we have seen, it very much is about diets, how to help people to choose the diet which will both match their individual needs in other ways also than just in terms of health outcomes. And it's diet which is the decisive question there. And I tried to make some cartoons here. This first one is about the genotyping approach, where we really try to diagnosticize and classify people, and then that was I would say the first area of the, as was pointed out also by Mike Gibney, then have some treatments or advice or nutraceuticals which would fit that genotype. And as was pointed out, that is not an easy way. And if we think then of eating situations, even in a family and wherever, people can have quite different expectations and feelings and so on about food. And the problem is that how can we say that, all right, yes, but please, you need to consider your health outcome. And therefore I think that this is partly, as far as I understood the previous speaker also, we are sharing some thoughts. I, coming from the food technology, also never can forget about the preferences, the sensory appeal to food, because that needs to be kept there. And I think one of the horror scenarios for personal nutrition could be that if it's thought to be something which is so technical or so eating according to some rules and measurements that we lose the joy of eating, and we always must keep that. But anyway, people have their preferences. We have the general recommendations, like was pointed out earlier in this session. And then the question is how to help people to pick up from the healthy options which are available something which is really good for them, even at a general level, and also appeals for the personal preferences. And I think that here that this monitoring and motivating tools which we are developing, some of them were shown there. We are also working on that in Finland. Can help then in making it more visible to the person that yes, this was good for you, even though it was generally recommended, even though we can't really say that this protects you from getting cancer at year 75. We can say that yes, this made a difference, and therefore the personalization comes from the fact that the person understands that I changed when I changed my diet. And this gives immediate feedback, and that would be motivating. And of course, in the future, we could think that we can hold chart here. And really, there are quite many possibilities for businesses, I think, although it's not very simple, and then the time frame is we have to see. But anyway, the fact is that it's not only food we are picking up, we should pick food and the information load. The health information is among many other informations, and we all know that food packages are becoming very full of small text, and it's very hard to try to read what actually is said there. And very many people don't read it at all. So the motivation should come from other ways to do that. But then we have to have communication. And when and therefore I think that there are new technologies, for example, to put information in packages. We have lots of tags, readable devices. We can actually filter the information which the consumers should have from there, which would be personalized in the way that when his profile, his preferences, he can pick up the information what's important for him. And actually we have the first prototype of this kind of service worked out at VTT in collaboration with the University of Eastern Finland, where we developed, based on the mobile a camera in the mobile and the barcode, which was then connected the product information to a database, and we had a filter which was personalized in the beginning, just by questionnaire, and then people could use this when they were comparing different foods. We also had physical activity as another element. You could play with the information and see how, if I eat this or this, how much my favorite physical exercise I should take to counteract the energy, and all kinds of things. And this is just, there are several others, an example of how we can go forward. And then we don't actually change the food. We can, of course, have to have a good food offering with good sensory appeal, but we are changing the way people play with or perceive the information on foods. And therefore I think that there are really, for me, two opportunities here. One is to produce all the time more healthy food options, more healthy food delivery options, because it's very much about, like was discussed, about eating patterns, where, when, how, with whom. So we need to have foods which would not, where people don't need to compromise too much, but then we need to have these new tools for communicating and monitoring, and actually they should bring the person the joy of controlling his life and also realizing that perhaps there is the so-called feel-good factor if you are changing your diet. Sometimes you can even feel that or lifestyle in another way. And the last slide is just saying that I think that going back to Nutrigenomics and genetics and all the systems biology, for me that has been a useful thing also because it brings nutritionists, food scientists and medical doctors closer to each other. And of course there's also business-wise an area where there's collaborations or competition and whatever. But that also brings us to the target church and understanding the pathways. And then at some cases it can be a question of at certain situation we can have either a preventive drug or we can have a counseling system or something. And then therefore we also need cost efficiency studies. We need to have a nutrition economy as well as we have health economies otherwise, because especially if this is something which is offered by the healthcare system, they want to see that it's cost efficient. So I want to thank you for attention. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues in Kuopio who have been working together with this research into the mechanisms of health protection in foods. There's one person currently not anymore in Kuopio, Isabel Bordiapons, who is currently working here in Pamplona. And also at VTT, especially Mateo Resic, who is running the metabolomics platform, and then the people working with the cereal technology and food development, taking into account the health options. And Kaisa Poutanen is one of my colleagues working with hybrid media, which means that combining the ICT tools to work for the information. And this kind of work we are continuing now, but hopefully we don't have as good resources as the previous speaker, but anyway, we are quite optimistic that we can produce something new here. Thank you very much for attention.